Today's topic is game modes and removing game modes in Smite. Before you go all crazy and say, Duke, you cannot remove my favorite game mode from this game, hear me out. We're first gonna look a little bit at what the numbers here are. So Smite has 6 different maps: Conquest, Arena, Assault, Joust, Siege, and Clash. For a MOBA, that's quite a high number. I was trying to figure out how many maps other games have, other MOBAs have. I was not able to exactly find out because some data seemed a little bit outdated and stuff like that. But if I'm not wrong and I found the right information, then League of Legends currently has 3 different maps: Summoner's Rift, Twisted Treeline, and Howling Abyss. And Dota 2 has only one singular map. However, both of these games also have multiple game modes that kind of revolve around these maps. So, for example, in League of Legends, you have certain ranked modes and non-ranked modes. You have a changing mode that is basically similar to Smite's Match of the Day. In Dota, you have various versions of the main map where you can adjust certain things, like, for example, only spawn minions in mid lane and making it an all mid game and stuff like that. So, there is flexibility in other games as well as in Smite. In Smite, the variety here seems much larger though. The only game that I could think of that brings in a similar number of maps is Heroes of the Storm. Heroes of the Storm actually has a total of 12 maps with different map interactions, so they're basically different modes. However, different from Smite, as far as I could find out, all of these are 5v5, and you're not queuing for a specific map, you're queuing for the game in itself, and then you randomly end up on one of those maps. So basically, you're thrown in a queue with everyone, and then you just end up on one of the maps. Obviously, there's still ranked and non-ranked and stuff like that, but this seems to be the essence of how it functions in Heroes of the Storm. Smite doesn't have that. In Smite, you queue for every different game mode, every different map individually, mostly because you have different player numbers for different maps. If we're not strictly speaking about maps here, but modes, then we actually have 7 casual modes, which includes Mode of the Day, as well as the 6 maps mentioned. And we also have 3 ranked modes: 1v1, 3v3, and Conquest 5v5. The only maps that are used multiple times are the Joust map for both Joust and Duel, and all the other maps when they are in the rotation for Mode of the Day. Other than that, every mode is assigned to a single map, and that map is only assigned to a single mode. There is something that stands out. If we exclude ranked queues here, we actually have a total of 4 5v5 maps. We have Conquest, we have Arena, we have Assault, and we have Clash. We used to have another 5v5 map being Siege until that was changed to a 4v4 map. And we actually used to have another map back in the days, which was Domination, which is now removed, also being a 5-player map. And here's where things get interesting. Now, Smite wouldn't be the first game to remove a game mode. They have removed their own Domination in the past, but for example, League of Legends has removed a similar arena-type game mode, or even rather close to Domination, called Dominion back in the days, that just wasn't played enough, and because the player pool was too small, they decided to ditch that. What you have to realize here is that League of Legends has a much larger player base than Smite, and they still decided to remove a mode that was just too unpopular. With the difference in player base, it wouldn't be too far off to assume that a singular Smite mode gets as many players as Dominion used to get before it got completely scrapped. So, is it really beneficial for Smite to have that many modes? There is an obvious benefit in having so many player modes. Some people may just be interested in specific modes and just want to play those, and for them, it's very nice to just have that one mode that they can stick with without having to look over the fence ever and just stick with that. There is the option to have more variety, just to, pick whatever you feel like on a particular day, and that may keep some people in the game. But what it leads to, on the other hand, is worse matchmaking. When the player base is so split, it makes it much harder to find enough players in your particular game mode and then to evenly match teams, especially in a game like Smite, where you have 3 different platforms that are actively played and where no crossplay is enabled. So, what can we do? The easiest option would obviously be removing game modes. And I would not be completely opposed to that. I love Siege, don't get me wrong. Siege is my favorite mode in Smite in terms of visuals of the map. That jungle design is just freaking amazing. And for the longest time, I was saying, we need this mode just because it looks so cool, just because it feels so nice to play on that map. And I still wish for that visuals to be moved to some mode where it can still be applied. The problem with Siege is, playing Siege these days isn't really fun unless you're into pub stomps. There are 3 types of people that are really queuing Siege. Either solo queuers that just randomly happen to queue the mode and play on their own, pre-mates who want to play in a 4-player scenario, just maybe people who didn't find a 5th player, or pre-mates that are like actually looking to farm wins in Siege, get an inflated elo from that, which doesn't matter outside of the Smite score anyways. But hey, some people actually just play Siege all the time, have ridiculous win rates, and just play in those high-level pre-made teams. So those 3 are thrown in the same pit of players, and because most of the time there aren't enough players to actually go for any sort of decent matchmaking, they are put against each other. So you have the casuals who are getting put against pre-mates, meaning they almost always lose. You have the pre-mates going against the try-hard Siege mains, who will then always lose as well, or almost always lose as well, and that's pretty much Siege. 99% of the time you can basically guess the outcome of a Siege match by seeing the player stats before the match. And that's not only in Siege, but in Siege is especially obvious because that mode is so low on the list that so few people play it, and you can just look at the stats of the match and be like, yeah, well, that's why we won it, or that's why we lost it. And that's all there is to it. So in the end, Siege is not a game mode that would bring any sort of balanced, fun gameplay. And I don't think we need a mode to farm wins, or, well, a mode where you look at a nice landscape. And that's not the only mode. I will point at Clash here, which is more balanced because more people play it, but still far from popular. Even Assault is often just a roll of the dice, and that's not only in terms of the gods that you get, but anything else as well. The only mode that I would say is somewhat balanced is Arena because of the large player base, and somewhat Conquest in terms of matchmaking because there's still a decent amount of players playing it. Even 3v3 is hardly ever a match where you would say it's, well, fair for both sides. So if we were to remove 1 or 2 game modes, what would that lead to? Well, it would obviously lead to some players straight up leaving the game. Those people who just play their mode and don't want to play anything else, they would just go. That is a loss, but from a company as well as players' perspective, it's not a terrible loss. If you only have a few players going that don't want to play any other mode, then, well, those few will be gone. Instead, everyone else will go into other game modes and will give you better matchmaking in those modes. And that should usually help a little more than losing the few players. Because in the end, if you have a more balanced match, that will keep more players in the game than those who, those few who leave because they only want to play this one particular game mode. Now, obviously, you're always going to step on somebody's toes. It's not going to be easy to make a decision on which world this is, but like I said, Siege, for example, is very, very underplayed. Would this bring players into the more, well, competitive modes like either casual Conquest or especially ranked Conquest, though? Probably not. The players who look for a casual experience would probably just move on to other casual modes, unless there is more of an incentive to play the other modes. I know there will be more of an incentive in Season 4 with the changed rank system where you get rewards per split of the season. So that will work in that favor, but also there needs to be a lot more guidance for players. I will address that in more in-depth in another video regarding the whole transition into Conquest. So what you get is a better player pool for your other game modes. So what can you do here? My thought is do what Heroes of the Storm did, but to a lesser extent. There's actually a question on Twitter from Hi-Risk Chris today if Siege should become a 5v5 mode again. I don't think it should. I think it should sadly just go. But if it was to become a 5v5 mode, or even if it wasn't, even if we just put Arena, Assault, and Clash in there, we could just make a 5v5, well, fun mode queue, so to speak. Put Arena in there, put Assault in there, put Clash in there, leave 3v3 Joust out, and leave Conquest out. Now you have 3 modes you can queue from, and maybe put Mode of the Day in there as well, actually, and have those 3 modes and allow people to queue for either the Conquest experience, for the fun 5-man queue experience, or the 3v3 as a pre-made or whatever. That will make things so much easier. it would make for so much better matchmaking. Yes, obviously you wouldn't always get to play the map that you want to play, but in the end I think people would get used to it, and in the end it would be much better matches for everyone, much fairer matches. And even if you have to play Assault and you don't want to play it, well then, you'll play something else the next time you queue probably. You could consider putting even Conquest in there, but I feel like that could lead to problems. It would be nice on one end because it would put people into Conquest, but the kind of people who would try hard in Conquest would be, well, not very happy with that. And at the same time, there kind of has to be a separate Conquest queue for people who just want to play Conquest. So if you had to create these queues, it would kind of be a weird overlap. But just reducing it to 3 different queues in casual would already change so much about matchmaking and how the game feels overall. And I think that would be a great step for Smite. I know it's not the same as in Heroes of the Storm, because in Heroes of the Storm you always, for example, get to choose your character and you kind of queue with your character and stuff like that. It is a bit different, especially if you include Assault, but I think it's worth the sacrifice in order to have a better experience overall. If that should not be the case, there would still be the option to multi-queue instead, to just allow people to queue for multiple game modes at the same time and get into a match in whichever game modes, well, gets a full team first, to get full availability for a team first. I know that's complex with the current coding system of Smite, and there would be need to be a lot of changes to it before that can work, but it would be great if it worked out that way as well, allowing people to get into games faster and giving the different game modes more population because people just are there quicker. That's my take on this. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I know a lot of you will disagree on certain parts of this, but that's absolutely fine with me. Thank you guys for watching. I hope to see you for the next one very, very soon. Duke Sloth, out.